My name is Mark Deitos, and on behalf of Inspirali and IBCMed, it's a pleasure to welcome Professor Wulf Rossler to our Psychiatry Specialization Program Opening Lecture 2024. Professor Wulf Rossler was nominee by our students in an open and spontaneous vote as the psychiatrist who they wanted to have the opportunity to listen to his latest subjects of interest and findings. As IBCMed aimed to impact our whole student and faculty community, we've decided to have Professor Wulf Rossler lecture recorded and shared with our 500 plus students and 32 faculty members located in 6 different campuses in Brazil. In choosing that, we hope to reach as many students as possible and our engaged alumni community as well. So let's welcome our guest, Professor Wulf Rossler, with a brief introduction. Born in Germany, Dr. Rossler holds a degree in medicine and psychology from the University of Heidelberg. He graduated in general psychiatry with additional specialization in social medicine and psychiatric rehabilitation. In 1996, he was appointed to the chair of clinical psychiatry at the University of Zurich, simultaneously becoming the director of the Clinic for Social Psychiatry and General Psychiatry at the West Zurich University Hospital. In 1996, he was appointed to the chair of clinical psychiatry at the University of Zurich, simultaneously becoming the director of the Clinic for Social Psychiatry and General Psychiatry at the West Zurich University Hospital. Additionally, he served as the head of the medical directorate of the Zurich University Psychiatric Hospital from 1999 to 2003 and from 2009 to 2013. In 2007 and 2008, he was a visiting professor at the Institute of Psychiatry of the University of São Paulo. Since April 2010, he has been a visiting professor at Leuphana University of Lüneburg. After retiring from the University of Zurich, he held the senior chair at Leuphana University and the postgraduate chair at the University of São Paulo. He was also appointed as a senior professor at Charité Universitätsmedizin Berlin in 2017. Dr. Rossler is the author of over 800 scientific articles and 20 books, including Fields of Action in Psychiatric Care, The Therapeutic Relationship, 2004, Psychiatric Care for Chronically Mental Ill, Data, Facts, Analysis, 1996. His research focuses on schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, and global mental health. He is a former president of the World Psychiatric Association and has served as a consultant to the World Health Organization on mental health. Today I have the pleasure to host the first of 2 lectures given by Professor Wulf Rossler. The topics were agreed previously with our Psychiatry Specialization Program Coordinator, Professor Francisco Pascual. Welcome, Professor Wulf Rossler. It's a great pleasure to host your lecture on the topic of mental health prevention.
Okay, Mark, well, thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be here and hold the lecture. And when you asked me to come here, and I thought, well, giving a lecture on what you can read everywhere, I thought I would prefer to give a lecture what you cannot read everywhere, and which is maybe an unusual topic because we are working in the field, we are providing therapies for our patients, and do we think that we could ever prevent any mental disorder? And this is the topic I want to talk about today. And the second lecture will be about the social determinants of mental illness. We are living in a world where it seems the brain is everything, but actually the brain depends on the environment, and there are so many influencing factors on the brain. This is an interesting topic which I will focus on in my next presentation. Well, actually, I felt sorry for you when you invite a guest of my age. Sometimes the introduction is longer than the lecture, So let's get started here with the presentation, and you probably can see during the course of the presentation many figures, numbers, etc. And I really do not want to read every figure, etc. I want to talk about it, and you can stop the presentation and look at the presentation, and you can maybe focus on some of the figures, but it's very boring just to read all the figures to you. But it's an interesting question if we ask, can we prevent mental disorders? And this has been a question which has quite unusual, and we never asked it. So I thought I start with something else, what I recently read in the New York Times. It was about longevity, a long life. And this article is about 7 keys to longevity. And I want to talk to you first about these approaches to longevity and how it is related to mental health. So, I start with a quote from Dr. Luigi Ferrucci, who is the scientific director of the National Institute on Aging, and he said, people are looking for the magic pill, but the magic pill is already here. We do know what we can do to live a long and good life. When I say a long and good life, it's always about living in health a long and good life. So, what I said before, there are 7 keys to longevity. And you see the headings. There is one which you probably are aware of, move more. We live in a world which is quite sedentary. For some time, when I was working at my desk, my automatic watch stopped because I didn't move. So what we need to move. And this is very obviously a very important part of longevity and health as well, moving. And just if you look at the literature, it's always something between 5 and 10,000 steps a day. 10,000 steps a day is quite a bit, I must say. Okay, but one can do it, but do as much as you can. Second recommendation is eat more fruits and vegetables. You all are aware what is good food. This is mostly Mediterranean food, which you should prioritize with fresh products, not processed products. It's more like what we call slow food instead of fast food. Fast food is most of the time processed food, and it's not very healthy. Olive oil is always a central part of the Mediterranean diet. And it has been shown to lower the risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and as well dementia. And these were 2 recommendations most of you probably are aware of. But the third one is a little bit different and not so much made for young people. Get enough sleep. People of my age usually are in bed already. But, you know, it's very clear that good sleep and enough sleep is correlated to longevity as well and to good health. And what you can see, there was a study we did in the general population in Switzerland, young people aged 20 to 40, something, I'm not sure if you are aware that at the age of 25, more than 2/3 of all mental disorders have an onset before the age of 25. So you see why we look in psychiatry mostly at young people, because everything is happening in this area of medicine, in psychiatry, between birth, 25, maybe 30 or something like this, you know. So this makes the field of psychiatry very different from all other medical disciplines, which arise at the age when you're 50, 60, 70, and so on. But we deal mostly with young people. And the difference is that these people have to learn to live with their mental problems several decades. So the challenges we face are different. And one thing is, for example, if we look at the sleep problems in the general population and these young people. And what you can see here, and I need not to tell you in detail all the questions we asked, but it's mostly there is a group, which is the blue line, which have absolutely no sleep problems. But what you can see is that there is this red line. This is a group which covers about, I think, 11% of the young people, something have difficulties to fall asleep, they awake during the night, etc. And there's a third group which has serious problems with sleep all during the night. So now the next questions we ask and the recommendations, the 7 keys to longevity, is don't smoke and don't drink too much. It's so easy said, you know. Don't smoke. It is very clear the recommendation is really don't smoke. That means not smoking at all. I mean, that's the healthiest approach you can have, because it is very clear that smoking has so many detrimental effects on your health, you know. But this is also true, not quite so with alcohol. And there were the recommendations which differ between men and women, between the sexes, because the metabolism of alcohol is different between men and women, and it's clear that women should drink less than men, and the absolutely limit is 2 glasses for men and 1 glass for women. And when we talk of glasses, we are not talking of glasses of that size, you know. I mean, that's really small glasses.
Yes.
We are talking about, and the new recommendations go in a direction where we would say it would be best you don't drink at all. But it's difficult in our society not to drink. If you don't drink, people look at you strangely and ask you, why don't you drink? You know, it's hard for people to understand why there are some people who do not drink. And we live in a society where drinking alcohol is very common, you know. At least I know this from Europe. I do not know about Brazil, but we know that about only 20%, 10 to 20% of the populations do not drink at all.
Yeah.
And the rest of the people drink all, yeah. And you take several risks. You know, what I had on this figure on the left side, all kinds of cancers are associated also with drinking alcohol. I mean, we all are aware of cancer when you smoke, you know, that is very clear, but many people do not know that you take the risk of developing cancer when you drink alcohol. So, but you also might ask, what has smoking to do with psychiatric disorders? And what we look at is mostly at so-called sub-threshold disorders, and I will come to that point later on. For example, you can see that if you look at mental disorders over the life course of people, you can see that the mental disorders are highly correlated with smoking. Early onset of smoking, late onset of smoking, or no smoking at all. I think the dark gray is the early onset of smoking, the light gray is the late onset, and the black one, I'm not sure if they don't smoke at all. And what you can see, that people have a high risk who start smoking very early. They have a high risk to develop mental disorders as well, you know. So we come to the next key points. Manage your chronic conditions. And you know that in the adult population of most countries, there is a problem with hypertension, high cholesterol, and at least in the United States, more than 1/3 have pre-diabetes. This has also to do with obesity, and my impression from Brazil is that obesity is spreading here as well as it is in most industrialized countries, and there is also a high risk of developing diabetes. And you will see later on that diabetes and mental disorders are also highly correlated. So, but these are all conditions where you would say, okay, this is physical medicine or internal medicine. What does it have to do, in first place, with mental disorders? But let's take the last two of the recommendations. And there's one recommendation which is really surprising, is prioritize your relationship. It says here that psychological health often takes a backseat to physical health. And when we talk about relationship, is that isolation and loneliness is a significant factor for our health, and it takes about the size as smoking, you know. I don't know if you know that in the UK they have an own ministry for loneliness.
Yeah.
You know, that's really so surprising, because it's such a big problem in industrialized countries that people, by the way, are living alone. There are about 20 to 30% of the population which has never had a relationship to a person, you know. So you can imagine what the problem of isolation and loneliness means, and not only for old people, it also goes through the whole life. And then there's another, and the final recommendation is cultivate a positive mindset. And everybody would possibly think, okay, positive thinking, but do I get healthy from it? You know, and indeed, there is a correlation that people who are more positive and have a more positive attitude have a better health. You know, for example, several studies found that optimism is associated with a lower risk of heart disease, which I find surprising. And when we look, for example, in psychiatric rehabilitation, it's the fact that what we try to do is to give people hope. And hope is one of the most significant and important factors in rehabilitation, you know. Only if people are homeless, you know, that's hopeless, it becomes very difficult for them, you know. So just to give you the idea, what you say, manage your chronic conditions, there is a wide knowledge about the connection between depression and diabetes. The prevalence of clinically relevant depressive symptoms is almost 1/3 for people with diabetes. And even the correlation between major depression and diabetes lies with 11%. And we do know that people with a depressive disorder have a very increased risk of developing diabetes. I'll now come to the fact why this is the case. Because depression and diabetes have a link. There are behavioral factors. It is clear that people with depression show less physical activity, and this increases the risk for diabetes, etc. And depression is also associated with diabetes self-care, and so you see the interrelationship between diabetes and depression. What is the egg and what is the hen? Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes what comes first, depression and then the diabetes, or is it diabetes and then you turn to depression? And we also know that depression is a risk factor for the development of heart diseases, coronary heart diseases. Again, there are a lot of studies concerning this topic, how depression and heart disease are related, and I mention here a meta-analysis of 28 studies with more than 80,000 subjects who found that depression was associated with increased risk of cardiovascular diseases, in particular for acute myocardial infarction. And it's also the other way around. If you have a myocardial infarction, the risk of depression is there, and the cause of your infarction becomes much worse, if you are depressed. So again, this is not only behavioral connection. There are a lot of biological mechanisms which might underlie the association between depression and heart disease, like blood clotting, all kinds of autonomic nervous system dysregulation. Inflammation is a very important point. We do find a lot of cytokines, inflammation markers in many mental disorders, and we do find also a lot of neuroendocrine abnormalities in mental disorders as well as in physical disorders. So when you look at the 7 recommendations given in the New York Times, it's clear that 2 of the 7 recommendations are directly related to mental health, concerning relationships and being positive. The 5 other recommendations are well-known moderators of mental health. So you can see how longevity is not only a matter of keeping good physical health, it's also a matter of keeping good mental health. So the recommendation or the conclusion from the New York Times article was, and this I found particularly surprising, if you had to pick one healthy practice for longevity, do some version of physical activity, move. But if you can't move, then focus on being positive. And this is really surprising, I must say, that this seems to be the second important recommendation for longevity: stay positive, And that, in fact, there is a new branch, research in psychology, which is called positive psychology, and it's about positive life feelings, emotions, relationship, meaning, and purpose. And now I can give you directly a recommendation for your life. When you go to bed tonight, think of something positive. Yeah. And that already will make you feel better. And do this every evening. Don't go to sleep and think what you have missed during the day. Think something positive happened to you, and go to sleep with this positive thought. So I'll show you my most favorite research we have done. We looked at the distribution of suicides over the year, from January to December.
Okay.
And this, we accumulated data from 30 years. And what you can see here is, you see the data from October bis February.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you see this light gray line in here, and in December, there is a reduction of suicides by 30%. 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes year for year that we have such a reduction of suicide in December. On the 24th, there's even a sharp reduction of 50% of all suicides. This means this has to do that people are giving hope. I don't know how you celebrate Christmas in Brazil. I mean, I've been here during my sabbatical, and it was a little bit strange for me, I must admit, to celebrate Christmas in the full sun, you know. And but anyway, it is a time for us where we like to celebrate, we turn to each other, you know, we talk to each other, we are in a good mood, and this is what you can see. If you give hope to people, if you talk to people, if you invite people for dinner or something like this, this by itself reduces suicides by 30%. So my personal conclusion for our lives is, let's have Advent 12 months a year. You know, that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So now, in the beginning, I've started to talk a little bit about subthreshold mental disorders. I'm not aware if you know what that is. I like to demonstrate this all with this iceberg. Yeah, what you can see here. You see, what you see from the iceberg is only 1/10, and 9/10 of the iceberg are under the water. And this is similar to mental disorders. What you see on top are the diagnosed mental disorders. But under the waterline, you know, people suffer as well. You know, you can't say you need so many symptoms from that and so many symptoms of that or something like that, and then you suffer. People suffer before, you know. It's not only for the people, you know, who have a diagnosis according to DSM-4 or 5 or ICD or something like this. You see this huge iceberg. There are people who suffer much before they get a diagnosis, a full diagnosis, and this is what we call subthreshold mental disorders. Oops, that was the wrong one here. It is very clear that in psychiatry, most diagnostic thresholds are quite arbitrary or imposed on pragmatic grounds. What does it mean, arbitrary on pragmatic grounds? It means that in psychiatry, our diagnoses are made by experts. And if we get a new or a revision of a classification system, you know, the thresholds for diagnosis might change as well. And this was the basic idea, for example, for the introduction of DSM-5. There we find that the threshold for many diagnoses was lowered. And this was in the United States for certain reasons, because the people wanted to have access to the medical system, and this they only can get if they get a certain diagnosis, you know. So this is where we stand, and in reality, but in many respects, a dimensional approach would be much more appropriate than the categorical view what we currently have. And this is what I meant. People suffer even before, even if they don't fit in the categorical box, you know. And that's what it is. Dimensional approach means that we deal with problems which are part of the human condition. And they turn into psychiatric disorders when individuals cannot perform their social roles any longer. This is this is the turning point in their lives. And what does it mean? I mean, these people come to us when they are not able to perform social roles, or they have deficits in social relationships, they have problems in work and do not know what to do during the leisure time, or they feel they don't have a good quality of life. This is when they come, They don't come to us in psychiatry and say, I have so many depressive symptoms or something like that. They tell you what they can't do. And this is what I say when they suffer, and they suffer in their functional disability. Mm-hmm. So we come to the prevention, and probably you have an idea what prevention might be. It means providing measures to, what I've written here, to avoid adverse events or adverse developments. That sounds very simple. And when I specialized in psychiatry, everybody told me primary prevention, this is something you can forget. What does it mean, primary prevention? It's directed to risk factors of diseases. We look at, let's say, for example, and I will talk about this in my second lecture, look at pregnant women, look at what experiences a baby before birth, how does it impact on an unborn child when the mother has an anxiety disorder, for example, We talk about premature birth. We talk about depressive mothers, and these are all groups whom you can address, where you can be sure, when you look at their life and how they deliver their babies and how they raise their babies, how important this is for the mental health of the children. Secondary prevention is something we lately have tried to introduce, that we try to alter the course of an illness right at the beginning. And at the end of my presentation, I will talk about the early recognition and treatment of psychosis, where we have tried this. And tertiary prevention is to avoid relapses, etc. This is what all of you try to do if you prescribe medication and tell people how long they have to take medication just not to relapse back to the acute states of their illnesses. And this you are aware, and this has been the most common part of prevention. But now we fantasize of doing primary prevention and also secondary prevention on a much bigger scale as we are doing this currently. So you can read this yourself later on. We differentiate between specific, unspecific behavioral prevention, and you always can think about it, in which box can we do this, But I just wanted to give you preventive measures during childhood. What you have to be aware, where are the risk factors during childhood? And how can you develop, how can you reduce risk factors, and how can you increase protective factors for a child, And this is not very subjective. There are diagnostic tests which can be used. These tests already can be used in kindergarten, and so we can do on a bigger scale, standardized screening already in kindergarten or school. So we can identify children who are at a much higher risk to develop mental disorders in their lives. And you have to be aware that when I say developing mental disorders in their life, for example, OCD is quite prevalent. Approximately 1 to 3% of all children develop OCD, and even 20% of the children develop OCD before the age of 10. I mean, this is something most people are not aware of. And for psychiatry, it applies what applies to all other physical illnesses. Try to treat these illnesses, these disorders, as early as possible. It's much easier if you treat someone as early as possible, and this is naturally also true for mental disorders. I just wanted to list a few programs. You should not think that this is a completely new field of research. Since decades, there have been developed programs for different kinds of disorders, for example, for positive parenting programs, or environmental projects, or children of divorce, or if you have lost a parent, for example, there are effective programs. There are effective programs for all these problems already available. We just need to put them in practice. And this is the same here. I just tried to mention a few more that you see that we really are already not at the starting point, but we have already developed many, many programs, successful programs for children. The thing is that we are not aware or do not really know how long these positive effects hold. We don't really know about the long-term effects of the prevention programs, but this is the next phase of research which has to be done, And naturally, it's difficult sometimes with children. We struggle with high dropout rates in these programs, and we also struggle with stigmatization. Once you offer such a program to a child, you also put a label on a child that it has a problem. And neither children nor the parents like to have this, The same is if you go, when we talk about prevention, is about substance abuse. That substance abuse is worldwide a huge problem, for tobacco, there's the global burden of disease study mentioned, which is really an important study, that 12% account for tobacco, almost 10% for alcohol, and surprisingly what we talk about mostly are illegal substances, but they are not so important in total, There are so many people who die every year from tobacco use every year, and so many people who die from alcohol, and it's cost an enormous amount of money when the people are dependent on tobacco, alcohol, or whatever substance you look at, and it would be much more useful and to increase the efforts before people become dependent on alcohol or tobacco. For example, there's one point, and this is a real cheap method, is because we know that the price of a substance is the most important determinant of its use. If you increase the price of tobacco or cigarettes by 10%, you can reduce the use of tobacco by 5%, and this is a pricing. But you only can do it to a certain price level. I mean, if it gets so expensive that no one can afford to buy tobacco, then it becomes difficult, because then there comes much illegal cigarettes come in the country. So, you have to balance this, but you have to be aware that if people have to pay more for their cigarettes, they smoke less in general. That's very simple, and it's a very simple measure to implement. The same is also true for alcohol, So this is what I said already. I mean, we could and should reduce the use of tobacco and alcohol. I don't know what it is in this country, but in Europe for many years, you had a machine where you could draw your package of cigarettes, and it was everywhere.
Yes.
And they have reduced it so much. So it becomes much more difficult, if you're running out of cigarettes, to get new cigarettes, So you reduce access. Yeah, you reduce access of alcohol. For example, let me know, is it possible to buy alcohol at the gas station here in Brazil?
Yes.
You see? I mean, that's the point, that's where people can go almost 24/7, if they run out of alcohol, If you would restrict it and to normal hours when shops are open, probably this would reduce the use of alcohol. And this in all other countries as well, And the last bullet point here, this is also true for alcohol advertisement. Reduction of use by 10%, reduction of car accident by 10%, if you just stop to advertise alcohol, So you see, there would be many public health measures to reduce substance use in our countries, which we don't use. And now I want, in my last part, what is the time? Okay. I'm hurry up a little bit. We talk about the prevention of psychotic illness, because this seemed to be the most promising part, which was introduced in many countries during the last 20 years. And here you see again the stages of the schizophrenic illness, which you're well aware of, and it's very clear. There's a pre-morbid, a prodromal, and a psychotic phase of the illness. And you see, when you look at the pre-morbid state, there might be etiological factors which might be targeted, which we do not use yet, I must say. But I would just to introduce one old study which has been done in the 90s in Finland, just to make it clear to you that the onset of a psychotic illness is not a cannonball, and it does not just start and it takes its course, It's more like a feather ball, and it means that you might have a certain genetic equipment with a higher or lower risk for developing psychosis, but the environment takes an important impact on the onset of the illness. And I wanted to mention this Finnish studies, which is old, where children of mothers who suffered from schizophrenia were partly adopted to healthy families, and the other half stayed with the schizophrenic mother. And you could see at the age of 15, the number of people who had developed schizophrenia themselves again, the offsprings, the children, was significantly higher in the group of the children who stayed with the mother, with the schizophrenic mother, instead of being raised in a healthy environment. I mean, this doesn't mean, and I don't want to say, that we should take away all children from mothers with schizophrenia. This is what we would not do, but it tells us what we could do and could assist mothers with schizophrenia when they raise their children. And this could be a prevention. So in the pre-morbid phase, for children who also carry a high risk for schizophrenia, it could be in a pre-morbid phase where the number of people who develop schizophrenia. But what we mostly do is we look at people who are in the prodromal phase, meaning they develop some illness symptoms which are not very specific for schizophrenia. And if you had listened to my presentation so far, it is very clear what I want to say. Schizophrenia is also not a categorical diagnosis. You know, like 99% of the population are healthy and 1% develops schizophrenia. You see, it's much more true what you see on the lower bar. You know, probably are the symptoms of schizophrenia distributed quite equally over the whole population. That meaning that there are many people who develop subthreshold symptoms, you know, but do not receive a formal diagnosis of schizophrenia. So, and this is something I've done a lot of research, that I looked at subclinical psychotic experiences. And when you look at the general population, then you see that these subclinical psychotic experiences, there are numbers like 5 to 8% of the population have symptoms of schizophrenia, but do not reach the threshold of a diagnosis. And this might either be what we call psychotic experiences or hallucination as well. Probably you're not aware that about 8 to 10% of the general population reports to have occasionally hallucinations, you know. And if you ask in your family or somewhere else, have you ever heard a voice when no one was present? Some of you, there will be people who say, yes, I know that, or something like that, you know. And we are mostly not aware of that, you know. So it was Pat McGorry from Australia who developed a staging system. And this is a thing good to know. Probably the word staging you might know from other illnesses, from cancer, for example, you know, where you have pre-morbid stages where the cells you look at might develop to cancer or something like this, you know. And you can do this kind of staging. You can do this also with mental problems, you know. And you can see, and it's now so small that I can't read it here. I have to turn around here. See, that's stage 0, it's clear, it's asymptomatic. Yeah. Stage 1A, it's distress disorder, meaning stress-related, and we know all what it means to have stress-related disorders, having sleep problems, you know. Some people develop panic disorders or something like this, you know. There are all kinds of ways to deal with stress, you know. And it goes even on. Then you come to the subthreshold disorders, what I was talking about, you know. And then, what do you say, first treated episode, you know. That's the onset of the first time you develop the full-blown symptoms of something, you know. And then it could recurrent. It means it's treated, but relapse, it comes again, etc., or becomes chronic in the final stage. And I really don't want to compare mental disorders, excuse me, with cancer. It's completely inappropriate, you know. But the basic idea is the same, you know. You might be at a certain point at a certain risk. You might develop symptoms, but you can intervene and provide therapy at all stages in this part. And what is on the right side, and this the World Psychiatry, this journal is open access, and you all should look at this publication to understand, because all these stages also are involved with physiological processes like neuroinflammation, all kind of physiological processes where we also can intervene. You know, what we do today, you should not believe that there is a mind and there's a body. What we do have is all we do and all we provide in a final way always has an impact on your body. And it's your body which reacts. It's the metabolism which reacts, etc. And you can impact and intervene on all these levels. And this will be our future. It will not be our future to treat chronic cases, you know, and help people to live with chronic conditions. It will be our future to intervene at very early stages of the illnesses. And as you are all young people, I understand, and that you are interested in psychiatry and you specialize in psychiatry, you probably will overlook something like 50 years of psychiatry. And I make a bet today that when you retire, you know, there will be a completely different psychiatry than what you see today. We will much more be active at the early stages and will be effective and successful in treating all kinds of disorders. And this is why I've chosen this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Professor Rossler, thank you. As we have seen, mental health prevention is a complex topic. There are various factors that can contribute to the development of mental health problems, and prevention strategies need to be comprehensive and tailored to different realities. Professor Rossler highlighted here the importance of psychoeducation, resilience promotion, and the creation of healthy environments as essential measures for prevention, and also emphasized the need to invest in intervention programs that are effective to and accessible to all. I believe this presentation has helped raise awareness about the importance of mental health prevention, and now it's time to open for questions sent by Professor Francisco Pascual and some of our students who were addressed previously to Professor Rossler lecture. So first of the two questions.
Before you ask a question, let me say something to make something very clear, because you touched the point. We always have an individual, and this individual is more or less resilient or more or less vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And we always have an environment in which this individual lives. And you always have to consider, what can I change in the life of these people? Can I do something about their vulnerability? Can I strengthen their resilience? So this is directed to the individual. Or can I change something in their environment? You know, I mean, if you can't change the vulnerability, you need to reduce the stress in the environment for these people, you know. And this is what you always have to think about. You know, when you see. Sorry, I interrupted you. You have two questions. Okay.
No, but I think I will. Well, that's one of Professor Francisco Pascual questions. Okay.
Already answered. Okay.
Yeah, because he raised two questions. Yeah. Two questions. So, please, Professor, feel free to answer in your preferred order, both together, or comment on them. So, how important is psychoeducation for psychiatric treatment?
Okay.
And how is resilience built within the human being?
Okay. Okay, these are two different levels,
Yes.
okay, and questions. I am always a little bit hesitant when I talk about psychoeducation. I must say I have problems to educate adults.
Okay.
You know, that's, educate always is something where it's not symmetrical. You know, when we here discuss and talk, we sit to each other and discuss. But when you have a patient and you educate the patient, this is asymmetrical.
Okay.
I tell the patient what he has to do. You know, and so naturally it is clear that we have to provide knowledge to our patients. Let me give you an example. For example, let's talk about medication, because this is always a big topic for patients.
Yes.
Should I, and what happens, or something like this. So education means I tell those people these are the possible positive effects of the medication, and these are the adverse effects or side effects of the medication. This is education. I provide knowledge and a decision which has to be made by the patient, right?
Yeah.
I can tell patients, for example, what we formulated in our guidelines. Let me give you an example. Let's take the guidelines for schizophrenia.
Okay.
We say if a person has relapsed 2 times within a year or something like this, we recommend lifelong medication.
Okay.
So this is the knowledge. Why do we recommend this? We recommend this because we know that the relapse with acute phases is significantly reduced if you take continuously the medication. So, but the thing is, why do the patients do not believe us? Yeah, that's the question, because they make a very different experience. Tell you, the medication we provide, the neuroleptics we provide, the antipsychotics we provide, are a little bit like a prison of your emotions.
Okay.
Right? And this is something people experience and feel, that they are not very responsive in their possibilities to react emotionally. And this is why they dislike medication very often. And if people have to make decisions between short-term goals and long-term goals, you know, they sometimes prefer the short-term goals, you know. So, see, I mean, this is the point where we always say, why don't they follow our recommendation, you know? And many do not follow our recommendation. What we have to do is we have to provide information and have to discuss it with the patients and have to define their goals together with them. They have to formulate their goals in life. You know, for example, if you are, and this is not only schizophrenia, wherever you might relapse with whatever you do, whatever kind of illness, this always might interrupt your professional life.
Yes.
Right? So there are 2 questions. Do I want to take medication continuously? Yeah. Or am I able to create a professional environment which from time to time would allow me to work differently or to stop working or things, you know, something like this, you know. This is what I personally miss in the discussion of our specialization, you know. It is, we do know from other medical disciplines like internal medicine, we do know that 50% of all hypertensive medication is not taken, you know. Why is it? Because people don't feel the hypertension, you know. It's a long time
Yes,
goal,
long time.
yeah. But there might be side effects which are not so pleasant. You know why people, So this is this part about psychoeducation. And then we talk about resilience.
Yes.
And this is, if you talk about resilience, and the unpleasant brother of resilience is vulnerability. Yeah, it's so to speak the other side of the coin. How vulnerable are you, or how resilient are you? And to be honest, more of our patients struggle with vulnerability than with resilience. This is and this is indeed something which is not easy to do, to increase the resilience. And this is where you work together with a patient. For example, how to handle, let's stay with schizophrenia, how to handle auditory hallucinations. Yeah? How do we handle auditory hallucinations? They can really sometimes bother people. Let's say we speak and I would hear a voice, and this voice is talking to me. It's honestly not easy to listen to two people, to you and my voice, to do that. But for example, there are psychotherapeutic approaches that you can talk to your voices. You can talk to your voices and say, hold back for a moment. I'm just discussing with Mark.
Yes.
Right? So, so you try to mediate skills, how to handle symptoms of the disorder, And this naturally makes you resilient, one point. Second point, resilience is have a partner. I've tried to tell you how important it is, not only for a long life.
That's right.
Have a partner. And this is indeed one of the most depressing parts of chronic mental problems, that people get more and more lonesome. So having a partner who is holding you and protecting you is like a shield.
Yes.
You can get, it's one approach. It's this invisible shield to be protected in a relationship, for example. But there are many other approaches there, and indeed this is a very important question. And the longer I do this, psychiatry, and I'm doing this now for unbelievable 43 years, the more I believe in psychotherapy and less in medication, I must say. What we always try to convey to our patients is to develop autonomy in their lives. And at the same time, we tell people, but you need to take medication. But medication is the contrary to autonomy.
Yes.
Something is happening to you when you take medication. It's out of your own decision. You just take it, and something in your metabolism happens, for the good or the bad, whatever. It happens without that you can impact on it. So being an autonomous individual means taking your own decisions. And maybe I'll give you a last example. during the last 10, 15 years, I experienced the healing power of being employed.
Okay.
Yeah. When in the 19th century, all mentally ill were brought away and kept behind walls and
That's right.
far away in so. Community psychiatry means you bring people back, they are not so long hospitalized, but, and that had been community psychiatry, you provide homes where these people can live, you provide sheltered workshops where these people can work. But this is an artificial world.
Mm-hmm.
What people want, they want to be, people with mental disorders want, they want to be part of our society.
Yes.
They do not want to be separated in sheltered homes, in sheltered workshops, etc. They want to be part of our life. And one of the most significant parts of our lives are for our own identity is our profession.
That's
what
right.
we do. When I ask young people, I say, when you go out at night, you want to go to a party or something. You meet a wonderful, let's say, girl, and the first thing she asks you is, what is your name? And what do you think what the second thing is she asks you? What are you doing?
Yes.
Right? And if you say, I'm working in a sheltered workshop, there is no third question, I can tell you, right? So you are labeled as a mentally ill person, you know, and they want to be part of our society, they want to be part of our lives. And whatever, and I've started this here together also, and Professor Gattas has a project, what we call supported employment.
Okay.
We try to bring people in employment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a reversal of the little bit old-fashioned psychiatric rehabilitation,
Yes.
where we always said first train and then place, meaning train the skills of a person and then try to find a place where this person can work. To be honest, most of the time we train these people forever and never find.
That's
So supported employment, it's the reversed model. We try to find a job for these people, and then we train these people on the job. Yeah. And this is really important. And you know, you wouldn't believe it. It's no medication could be more successful. Quality of life, symptom reduction, satisfaction with life, etc., etc. You know, it's like a life changer for these people when they become a part of our lives. You know, and this is what we have to think about. You know, when we think, how do we want to go with people who suffer from serious mental disorders? And this is not only schizophrenia. When you ever have seen, for example, people with severe OCD, this is such a disabling disease, or even take some kinds of anxiety disorders. It's a complete misunderstanding to think schizophrenia is the only severe mental disorders and all the others, what we used to call neurosis, or common mental disorders, you know, they are nothing. They can be as disabling as schizophrenia, you know. And this is, treat them as early, keep these people into society, bring them back to society, you know, and stand at their side, you know.
Thank you, Professor. And let me choose now one that came from our group of students regarding schizophrenia specifically. So the majority of patients hospitalized with schizophrenia are young adults and males. So would it be possible to develop schizophrenia in old age? And for females, why don't the symptoms appear as much, taking into account that the ratio between sexes is 1:1?
interesting question, and has been in the focus of research for 40, 50 years, that we are aware of the gender difference. And to be honest, it's not yet clear the age of onset between male and female schizophrenia persons is almost 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah? And there are a lot of hypotheses, and most likely it's just a combination of various hypotheses which work together. It starts with sociological explanations of deviant behavior between men and women, male and female. That deviant behavior of women is partly more accepted than with men. It has to do that deviant behavior and schizophrenic expression is more violent in male than in females, right? For example, and it might have to do with hormones, for example, because in the fourth decade of life, we have a small peak of women becoming schizophrenic. Meaning this is just about the time when menopause starts, with the reduction of estrogens. And it might be that, and that always has been an idea, that estrogens might be in a way protective to develop schizophrenia. And when the estrogen in women in the menopause declines, it might uncover a certain vulnerability to become schizophrenic. And this is why we find the second peak around 45 with women, and mostly are the cause of this what we call late onset schizophrenia is more severe than other causes. Is it possible? Possible is everything, but actually, I just heard about a 55-year-old man who developed schizophrenia, but I must say this is extremely rare that older people, men or women, develop schizophrenia. Whatever the reasons might be, but it surely has to do with the development of the brain, and there are not few neuroscientists who call schizophrenia a neurodevelopmental disorder. And the brain develops during like the gray matter in the brain increases 150% in your first year. Imagine, it's unbelievable. Your brain explodes, and the brain structure and cells change between 15 and 20 significantly. This is when boys and girls get difficult, because their brain is growing and changing, and this is also the most risky period for developing schizophrenia. So this is why neuroscientists call schizophrenia neurodevelopmental disorders. But let me put it in this frame. Even if it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, schizophrenia, it's still, and I try to explain it with this adoption study, which I mentioned from Finland. You see that the expression, even if of such a disorder, even if you have a certain vulnerability for such a disorder, does not necessarily mean that there is an open and a frank onset of the disease. Yeah? So this must be clear. It's not 100% necessity that you become schizophrenic, you know? This is all that we always have to remind. It's always this interaction between your body and your environment. And it always needs the two parts, you know, to come together. Was that the whole question, I think?
No, Professor. So, last one. From our students. And I found it very interesting. So, how can mental health professionals be better trained to implement prevention programs?
Very good. Learn. I mean, be curious, be open, you know. We have done a lot of studies concerning stigma. And we also have made several surveys on psychiatrists. And the thing is, psychiatrists do not stigmatize mentally ill less than the general population. They have the same prejudice as a general population. Sometimes they even think worse about mentally ill. It probably has to do with the fact that that doctors who work in institutions, in psychiatric hospitals, always have to deal with a very difficult group of patients, and gives them an impression that this is mental illness. It's not. I mean, mental illness is huge, and what you have to deal with in a psychiatric institution is like that, you know. And sometimes these people are dangerous, aggressive, etc., and gives you quite a bad picture about mental disorders, you know, and their dangerousness, etc. But what I would recommend to you is that if you decide to become a psychiatrist, it gives you the unique chance to think about yourself. No other medical discipline gives you this chance. In all other medical disciplines, the patients are an object. But in psychiatry, it's always an object-subject. Almost everything you experience from your patients, you can experience yourself. Almost everything. Everything of us has had obsessive or compulsive symptoms. Whom of us is always sure that he has locked his apartment? And two of us return and look, did I lock the door? Did I lock the car of the car? I mean, here you give it to someone to bring your car somewhere else, but I mean, some people still lock their car, and, you know, or did I turn off the heater? You know? So we all are aware that many things we know in an extreme from our patients, we know by ourselves. And it's always a very good exercise. I mean, just regard patients as part and extension of yourself. They are not different. They are not aliens or something like this. They are on a continuum, sometimes at an extreme, you know. But if you listen to yourself, you'll always find out, you know, not that could be me, but I know what you are talking about. not in each detail, but I know what you're talking about, right? So when you understand this, that most what you see as a psychiatrist affects you as a person as well, you know, then think about how did I help myself? What did I do to change my approach to things where I was anxious, angry, or whatever? And this is what you always can use. And this prevents you to look at your patients as objects. They are subjects. And they are the same as you know. So when we think about, this is the very individual part, what we can think about. You know, today when I still have a little practice, and when a patient calls or comes to me and asks me, can you help me? And what I usually ask a patient is, what do you have to offer to me? And I don't mean money. I mean, are you interesting?
Yes.
Do you have to offer something which might interest me? You know, so he has to think about it and might say, I have a very unusual symptom or something like it, you know? So, see, but that makes us grow together,
Yes.
you know? So I find it, and I never would have liked to do anything else but psychiatry, because I find it extremely interesting, not only when you experience the world around you, what people might think, what people might do, but how it relates to myself. This is the individual level. But, and what I would recommend to you, this is maybe when you listen to all this, what I was talking so long about, there are also public measures. It needs your input. As psychiatrists, there are public measures, you know, which can be done. Can we improve the life of pregnant women? You know, can we improve the conditions how babies are delivered? Can we improve the treatment of depressed mothers? You know, see what this is, and this is not an individual thing which needs to be done by one psychiatrist with his patients or something like this. This is something where you need to be political, you know. This impacts on our life. It impacts on the onset of mental disorders and mental health. And this is not only you are a doctor and I do my job, but it needs you as a political person, and where you know where we can improve the living conditions for people. We can improve their life and can reduce the rate of mental disorders.
Thank you, Professor. I had a great time with you. Thank you. I have many more questions here and no more time. So I want to invite our students, alumni and faculty members to join Professor Wulf Rossler's second lecture on the subject of social determinants impacting on mental health in a week from now. Thank you again, Professor Rossler, for being so humble and bringing simplicity to a complex topic. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you.